For those of you who may not know, the United States Conference of Mayors has taken a leadership role in the area of climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions since 2005, when we originally passed our Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement in response to President Bush's decision at that time to not sign the Kyoto Protocol. Over 1,000 mayors made that commitment, and we have continued to step up through a variety of local and national policies and initiatives. But we realize we can't do it alone. That's why we joined with the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions and formed our Alliance for a Sustainable Future. I want to thank our Executive Director, Tom Cochran, the President of C2ES, Bob Percicepsi, I'm sorry, Bob is early, for their incredible vision in forming this alliance. It was my distinct pleasure to appoint the Mayor of Salt Lake City, Jackie Biskupski, serve as the chair of this effort. Just for perspective, back in 2005, it felt like as mayors we were alone in our mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But now we're pleased that so many of our business partners and business leaders are committed to those same goals. We know a lot of it's due to this incredible partnership. The Alliance's purpose is to bring mayors and the business community together to identify the ways we can work together for the shared purpose of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building more resilient communities, and creating a more sustainable future. I'd like to thank Duke Energy and AECOM for being great supporters of the Alliance, and I hope that other members of the business community will join their efforts. I'd also like to thank Bank of America and AECOM for sponsoring today's forum. I'm not sure if I've seen the Mayor of Quito, Ecuador yet. I know that he will be with us very soon. Honored to have Mauricio Rodas, the Mayor of Quito, will be joining us today. Today is about dialogue with the private sector and information sharing. We want to hear from every mayor today, either during our forum or during our lunch. We want each of our colleagues to share their most innovative climate initiatives. If it falls under one of the topics this morning, great. If not, you'll have a chance to share your initiative during our luncheon program. I now want to invite our conference's Executive Director and CEO, Tom Cochran, to say a few words. Tom?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor. We come together today on the eve of a global meeting of mayors and people from around the world to continue to discuss the challenges that we have on climate. It is most appropriate, Mr. President, Madam Chair, that the American mayors come and stand before this meeting takes place. As you had mentioned, this organization has been in the forefront on this issue. When I was 12 years old, I marched with mayors when we formed Earth Day in New York City, and we marched all the way through for our first 1,060 mayors, which set an example for the European Union and the Mexican mayors to form their own covenants around our climate. We were in Paris. We supported the Paris Accords. And it's unfortunate that our president has abdicated and walked away from that treaty. And when you travel around and people come to Washington to meet with us, we say, what's going on? Mayor Brainerd, who is the chair, Mayor Brainerd of Carmel, Indiana, when the president walked away from the Paris Accord, said it really doesn't matter. The mayors will continue of the United States to be strong on this issue, and that's where we are. And we are very, as you have mentioned, Mr. President, fortunate to have as a partner Bob Percicepsi, who we are working with him in a partnership as we go forward in the business community. So we're here today on the eve of this meeting, and we appreciate the incredible leadership of the Mayor of Salt Lake City, Mayor Biskupski, and also our host mayor, Mayor Breed. Looking forward to working with all of you as we go forward. And thank you again, Mr. President, for your leadership. Thank you.
It's my honor. I mentioned having the honor and pleasure of appointing Mayor Jackie Biskupski, Salt Lake City Mayor, as chair of our Alliance for a Sustainable Future. She is an incredible leader, and I'm going to pass the microphone on to her. Take it from here. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Well, I hope you can hear me all right. I certainly was pleased to be appointed into this role, and I'm very grateful to Mayor Benjamin for making me a part of this alliance in a very unique and leadership way, and so thank you very much for that. I do think we want to turn a little time over to the audience at some point, but we're going to work through this a bit. And I would like to also acknowledge, is Mayor Gonzalez out there? Javier, are you out there? There you are. Hello. So former mayor of Santa Fe, Javier Gonzalez, was the chair of this Alliance committee, and I just wanted to call you out and say thank you for leading in the beginning of this alliance and doing this great work. So I much appreciate all you have done for us. I also, as Mayor Benjamin said, the Alliance was formed to bring mayors and the business community together and identify ways we can work together in order to reduce greenhouse gases and build more sustainable and resilient communities. We do this by identifying best practices that other cities and businesses can replicate. On our Alliance website, you can find best practices, webinars, and surveys. And I'm pleased that today, at our press conference, we will be releasing our second nationwide city survey that outlines what local governments are doing in the area of transportation, buildings, and the energy sector. Today has been designed to promote a discussion between mayors and the business sector. We have with us some excellent examples of where the business sector is working with communities to promote energy, efficiency, and sustainability projects, as well as investing in renewables. Our goal for this meeting is to find out how we can take these best practices and promote them throughout the United States. We want the business sector to discuss why they made the decisions they did and what obstacles still exist. I would like the mayors to discuss how they work with their business community and overall how we can better work together to reduce our nation's greenhouse gas emissions. I welcome all of your ideas this morning, and I would like to ask the president of C2ES and our partner for the Alliance, Bob Perciasepi, to make some remarks this morning. Bob?
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here with so many mayors. Tom, I know you get to do that a lot, but I often am meeting with just a few at a time, and so having all of them.
Get right in there.
Be a rock star, Bob.
All right.
There you go.
This way I can drop it after I'm done. So I want to repeat myself a little bit here. Thank you, mayors. It's an honor to be here with you, Mr. President and Madam Chair. It's great to work with both of you, and also to see so many mayors here today wanting to talk and listen and participate in this discussion. We're at the very beginning of this week here in San Francisco, where a lot of the conversations are about how to increase ambition. And the title on the agenda here of my little quick talk here is the need to expedite. So let me give you a couple of points. Those of you who don't know C2ES, or the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, We are a nonprofit, think tank, nonpartisan organization, and one of our goals and one of the things we do every day is to try to bring mayors and governors and city officials and state officials and businesses together to make progress. Of course, we work with the federal government when they're stepping up as well, and we also work internationally and try to involve everybody in the same way. But the whole idea here is to catalyze action, and in the absence of federal policy, catalyzing action becomes more important than ever. Let me just say something about some of the emissions picture here. I'm going to use the word gigaton, and I apologize. But you've all heard that term before. It's 1 billion tons. 1 gigaton is 1 billion tons. So since this is not going to be a really long history, but since 1850 to 1999, humans emitted into the atmosphere 1,000 gigatons of carbon dioxide. In the last 18 years, we've emitted another 500 gigatons, half of what we did going all the way back to 1850. And right now, on an annual basis, we're not growing a lot globally, but we're doing about 30 gigatons a year. And some estimates say that in order to stay under 2 degrees, that is the goal of the Paris Agreement, we can only put another 300, maybe 400, depending on how you want to tweak things. Let's say 300 to 400 more gigatons in the atmosphere. Now, you guys can do the math. Divide 30 into 300, that's 10 years, right? Divided into 40, it's maybe 15 years. So 13 years. So whatever those numbers are and however we can bend the curve, you can see we're very close to being at a time. And if you think about my own life, when I was born, this is not trying to tell you how old I am, but you'll probably be able to look this up. When I was born, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 300 parts per million, measured in Hawaii. Today, or last year, it averaged 406 or so. And it's probably going to be higher again this year. So you put that 30 gigatons into the air every year as a global emission, you can see the actual emissions are going up, and they are now higher than they've been in probably over 1 million years. And so you can see that we don't have much time here. We need to expedite, we need to increase our ambitions. And I think you heard Mayor Benjamin and Mayor Biskupski talk about the need for mayors to continue to lead, and they certainly have been, and the opportunity that exists for us to build partnerships with the business community to maybe even go faster, because obviously we need to go faster. And one of the things, just to presage the press conference just a tiny bit, when we surveyed mayors, working with the Conference of Mayors, 90% of the cities who responded are either already partnering or want to partner with other local governments. 80%, 83% to be precise, of the mayors that we surveyed are already partnering or want to partner with businesses in their community to make progress happen faster. So on the other side of that coin, 95% of the responders have experienced something that is related to climate change in the last 5 years. And so you see the increasing amount of impact, whether it's heat. Tommy, I'm pretty certain there was more 90-degree days this year than last year. I'm pretty certain, because I live in the District of Columbia. So thank you for hanging with me there. But these impacts are growing. I mean, I guess there is a little bit of irony that some mayors have to leave soon, and some are not here because of hurricanes. So what this week is about, to conclude and to really giving you that background of why we need to expedite, what this week is focusing all the people who are taking leadership, and mayors are a key component of that, and how we can take this leadership and build partnerships, and most importantly, build momentum and motivation to go faster and farther than we ever thought we could. And we need to do that, and we need to do it as soon as possible. So today, I hope we're going to hear some, I know we're going to hear some examples of where people have been making this progress, and that's what, as Mayor Biskupski mentioned, is one of the key elements of our alliance, is to bring those examples forward and then get them out to as many people as possible so they can be replicated, improved upon, and accelerated. So I'm going to stop there with that context and turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Bob, very much. So next we will cover why utility and city partnerships matter. And I wanted to start with my own experience in Salt Lake City and introduce you to CEO Cindy Crane, who works for Rocky Mountain Power. We will share with you our best practice that we created that has been replicated by other communities in Utah. And I'll start by sharing my version of the story, and then we'll turn some time over to CEO Cindy Crane. So Salt Lake City is Utah's capital city. It's the largest city in Utah, and we are leading the way to enable access to renewable energy to improve local air quality, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to help preserve our community. According to NOAA records, Salt Lake City is warming at twice the global average, and we certainly are feeling it. We're faced with the reality of losing much of our $1.3 billion ski industry. We also have other challenges with our air quality. The city and much of the Wasatch Front is surrounded by mountains, and so climate change and the ozone exacerbate our air quality. So it is imperative to do what we can to minimize the effects of climate change. Emissions from Salt Lake City's electricity usage comprise over 50% of our community carbon footprint. So transitioning to renewable is the biggest single thing we can do to reduce it. July of 2016, I come into office, and lo and behold, in 2015, Cindy Crane is appointed to be the president and CEO of Rocky Mountain Power. We have a very unique opportunity that is laid before me because our franchise agreement had not been renewed. And for many of the mayors in this room, you know that franchise agreements can go for 20 years. So this was a premier opportunity for me as a leader to meet with the new CEO and president of Rocky Mountain Power and have significant dialogue around this unique window of time. And in our endeavor, I was able to do a joint resolution with my city council on renewable energy, pledging that 100% of the community-wide electricity would be powered by clean energy by 2032, and 50% of our municipal operations will be powered by renewable energy by the end of 2020. We pledge to reduce our carbon emissions 80% by 2040. Based on polling data, residents in Salt Lake City prefer renewable energy, and they want resources such as wind and solar to power their homes and businesses. Residents are also very excited by the prospect of renewable energy becoming the local standard. Strong customer demand led our city to prioritize this partnership with Rocky Mountain Power for improved access to renewable energy. And we want to thank them for their willingness to listen and help co-create the vision for our energy future. Salt Lake City and Rocky Mountain Power signed a cooperation statement in August of 2016. The documents that the various ways we will partner going forward. The statement was signed in conjunction with a renewal of our franchise agreement for a 5-year term. This cooperation statement is unprecedented, but it is an important one, and it holds us accountable to one another to make sure we are both doing our part to achieve the goals that we have set out. In addition to partnering with Rocky Mountain Power, we are also partnering with other Utah communities. These communities and Rocky Mountain Power are now working with Salt Lake City on state-level legislation that enables communities to make the transition to net 100% renewable electricity. But all of these successes are only possible due to the partnership we have, especially with Rocky Mountain Power. I'm pleased to now turn the time over to CEO Cindy Crane so that you can hear her perspective on the work we have been doing together over the last couple years.
Thanks, Jackie. And you guys are my test bed. I am doing sustainable personally, so I have gone paperless. So this is my first time using my iPad for my speaking notes, so let's hope it goes well. But seriously, good morning. You know, at Rocky Mountain Power, we are a proud, affordable, low-cost power provider, and we have a legacy of providing low-cost power for more than 100 years in Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho, in all 3 of those states. We serve just over 1.1 million customers, and we offer some of the lowest rates in the U.S. In fact, our Utah average rates are 9th lowest in the country and are 20% lower than the U.S. average electricity rates. And Rocky Mountain Power, as part of the PacifiCorp business, we are also the 2nd largest owner of wind generation among regulated utilities here in the U.S. And we will be more than doubling our wind generation fleet by 2020 as part of our Energy Vision 2020 program. So when Jackie and the citizens of Salt Lake City said that they wanted more than low rates and reliability, we were ready to join the partnership and truly make a difference. So we have been walking arm in arm with Utah's capital city to make the moves that will create a more sustainable future for generations to come. We both have learned how much more we can accomplish together than if we were to try and go separately and independently. And together we have been able to create a model for other communities in Utah, as well as a model for even very specific individual customers who are looking for ways to reach their renewable energy, their carbon emissions, and their air quality goals. Our partnership with Salt Lake City and now several other Utah cities and counties goes beyond just providing renewable energy. It is a partnership that is all-encompassing. But first and foremost, Salt Lake City and Rocky Mountain Power prioritize energy efficiency, and for good reason, because we all know that the energy we don't use is the cheapest as well as the cleanest. So we invest through Rocky Mountain Power between $60 to $80 million annually just in Utah for energy efficiency. And we have also put long-term resource plans in place to meet our future electricity demand, 88% of that demand by energy efficiency. And we incentivize this through our national recognized Watt Smart programs. We expect to award $1 million or greater in incentives from Watt Smart programs for the energy efficiency measures that are being incorporated into the massive rebuild and expansion of the Salt Lake International Airport. We've worked together to boost energy efficiency in the commercial buildings through the city's Elevate Buildings program. And Rocky Mountain Power created a tool for the city and for the building owners to easily be able to upload their whole building usage data to energy benchmarking programs, giving them comparative information that they needed and they can now use to assess and implement energy efficiency improvements for their buildings. This year, we are proud to have launched a Watt Smart Communities program to empower our communities to partner with us to shape their own energy future. Through facilitated workshops held earlier in this year, community stakeholders engaged with Salt Lake City and Rocky Mountain Power to develop a vision, to set goals, and to create an action plan that reflects how the community wants to shape its own energy use and supply. The program specifically focused on an area of the city where there is a large population of low-income households and small to medium-sized businesses. As Jackie indicated, beyond just natural geography in the Salt Lake Valley, the single largest contributor to our air quality concerns in the valley come from tailpipes, with buildings and homes being in second place. So we've worked with the Utah legislature to enact the Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan. The bill established $10 million of dedicated funding for the electric vehicle infrastructure, which is an important piece of our partnership with Salt Lake City to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It will help accelerate the adoption of plug-in electric vehicles by the development of electric highway corridors, which have been completed. With expanded Department of Energy grant funding that we sought, we were able to expand those corridors, and they will now stretch from Yellowstone Park through Utah to the southern border, giving travelers range anxiety-free travel to our beautiful national parks. We have partnered with the ride-hailing services of Lyft and Uber for promotion of electric vehicle transports throughout our cities and to our ski resorts. We are advocating workplace charging, and we are incentivizing fleet conversions. In fact, earlier this week, there was an announcement that Park City received a grant of funding, and we will be matching some of those funds to also bring an additional set of electric buses that will be transporting the passengers from Salt Lake City to Park City and back and forth. We are working with the Utah Transit Authority to establish an electric bus charging complex at our facilities that are located on the route between the city's light rail system and the Salt Lake International Airport. To mitigate our strong economy growth impacts, we are working with commercial developers on 100% electric and sustainable new development. We are reshaping our incentives for existing homes and multifamily developments to enable switching from gas-burning water heaters and furnaces to all electric where it makes sense. The legislation also paved the way for Rocky Mountain Power to create the Subscriber Solar Program for customers who wanted the benefits of renewable energy without making the investments themselves. I was pleased when the mayor in Salt Lake City stepped up and became the first municipal participant in our Subscriber Solar Program, committing to 3 megawatts, which was 15% of the 20 megawatt solar farm that we had constructed in central Utah. But the legislation also directed our regulatory commission, as well as Rocky Mountain Power, to establish a commercial green tariff for those customers wanting renewable energy specifically, and to ensure that these specific requests could be met, but that they did not impact other Rocky Mountain Power customers. While advancing the legislation, we worked very closely with one of the Salt Lake Valley's largest industrial customers to develop an innovative tariff solution that moved that customer away from 75% of self-generation of their existing self-generation, which was coal-fired and located right in the Salt Lake Valley. We are currently putting mechanisms in place to help the city achieve its renewable energy goals. We will soon ask our Public Service Commission to approve the issuance of a request for proposals for a renewable energy resource to satisfy a minimum of 50% of the city's municipal operations by 2020. To this end, Rocky Mountain Power also secured legislation this year. So as a regulated utility, we have the ability to bid and to compete to be able to own, construct, and operate the renewable facilities. And we will seek a private letter ruling from the IRS in order to allow us to take advantage of the investment tax credit so that we can reduce the levelized cost of energy from these renewable energy resources. But ultimately, as the mayor has explained, the city wants to achieve net 100% renewable energy community-wide by 2032. The mayor and I joined together in offering testimony to a legislative interim committee recently so that we could lay the groundwork for a bill during the 2019 session of the Utah legislature. I told our lawmakers in Utah that Salt Lake City wants more renewable energy and that Rocky Mountain Power wants to be able to provide that energy to them, but that we need state code changes and therefore we need to have some legislation to assist us in achieving that goal. We have jointly agreed to several principles that will guide that legislation as we enter into the session. We are very encouraged that the interim committee voted to make this a committee bill in the upcoming session, which will give it priority standing for consideration among the hundreds of bills that are filed each year. So to close, we are 2 years into our joint clean energy cooperation agreement. Our partnership is strong. We realize we're clearing new ground as we work through legal, regulatory, contractual, and even operational challenges. But we have made great strides, and we are up for the challenge, and we will be successful in the coming weeks, days, months, and years. Thank you all for letting me be here today.
Thank you, Cindy, for your presentation and for sharing the story. And it really is a remarkable partnership and one that I am very grateful for and will continue to work on. What we did in Salt Lake City is about a community-wide effort, and our next presenters will discuss how they created a smart, low-carbon neighborhood in Chicago. To tell the story, we have Bill Abelt, Vice President for Energy at AECOM, and Dr. Shay Baramarad. Did I say that right? Baramarad? Thank you.
Nailed it.
Vice President of Engineering and Smart Grid at ComEd. At AECOM, Bill focuses on energy, sustainability, cities, and infrastructure. Prior to joining AECOM, he was at Shaw Environmental, and before that, he served as Environment Commissioner, Director of the Office of Budget and Management, and Chief of Management for Mayor Richard Daley, where he was responsible for developing Chicago's strategy to become one of the greenest cities in the United States. Shay most recently served as ComEd's Director of Distribution Planning, Smart Grid, and Innovation. Among her achievements in that role, she led the development of the first utility-scale microgrid cluster in the nation, in Chicago's Brownsville neighborhood, and of ComEd's Innovation Hub. So we'll turn the time over to the two of you, and if you would like to start,
Thank you,
Bill,
Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about our work with.
I'm going to bring it in. Bring it in, Bill.
Talk about our
There
talk
you
about
go.
our work both with the City of Chicago, where we're helping to develop the city's resilience strategy as well as its climate plans, and specifically our work with ComEd, the local utility, as it advances resilient, smart solutions for its customers and the communities that it serves. I want to echo the point that the mayor made at the beginning. I started my career working with the Conference of Mayors and partnering with the utility just on the idea of trying to keep the lights on and to develop a partnership around critical infrastructure protection. And I think what this reflects is the case study that we're going to share with you. It reflects the value of partnering with your utility and how that partnership, particularly over time, can make real investments that make a difference in your community and in the lives of the people there. And I particularly want to commend ComEd for years now of a massive transformation of the electric grid. They've invested to make the system smarter and more resilient and to serve its residents better. As importantly, they've invested a huge amount of resources, energy, and innovation in their customers, transforming not just the physical grid, but transforming the relationship with their customers and the way energy is produced and used. The best practice we're going to talk about today is at the neighborhood level, and it really emphasizes leadership, collaboration, and what that means for communities, and also talks about how we're working together with ComEd to go even faster. And I think at the heart of it is really the tremendous carbon-reducing potential of our great cities, neighborhoods, and the potential in partnerships with cities with their local utilities. In Chicago, that partnership is baked into the city's sustainability plan, into its resilience plans, and smart city strategies. The best practice that we're talking about focuses on a neighborhood in Chicago called Brownsville. It's just to the south of downtown, and it is an historic community. It's unique for a few reasons. One, it's unique in that the utility is leading the charge, right along with, and it's sometimes ahead of the city, understanding that it's not just about doing the right thing, but that the utility's investments are redefining its business model, redefining its relationship with its customers, redefining its relationship with its community. I think some of the other things that are really interesting about the Brownsville pilot that make it unique is it is a decidedly urban neighborhood in its character. It has tremendous racial and economic diversity, and it focuses primarily on an existing community rather than a greenfield build from the ground up opportunity. And in many ways, that's one of our biggest challenges for low carbon cities, is that this is primarily an opportunity for retrofit as opposed to new build. And then the final, I think, distinction that characterizes it as a best practice is that ComEd and the city have baked in community collaboration and participation. It's not top down from the utility or the city to the community. It's working with the community from the beginning to talk about what their needs and interests are. And Shay's going to talk about a few examples like vehicle car sharing for senior citizens, where the process didn't start with the utility thinking about that. It started with the community voicing the concerns. Our work with ComEd has been to support the overall design and delivery of their Smart City program. And one of the things they came to us and said is they wanted to accelerate reduction of carbon. And so we went and looked at Brownsville and recognized what a lot of good cities have, and that it was already a low carbon star. Brownsville, just by the virtue of the fact that it was a dense urban area with great transportation access, with investments that had already taken place in efficiency, the neighborhood and the city neighborhood was already a great place to start. It already had emissions, carbon emissions significantly lower than the surrounding region and many communities across the nation. But it also had some fundamental building blocks. It had building stock that could be substantially increased in terms of efficiency. It had opportunities for distributed renewable energy throughout the community. It had great transportation infrastructure, particularly rapid transit, rail service that was just crying out for more investment in enhanced services. So we sat down with ComEd and we established the baseline, the carbon baseline for Brownsville, and then we began to look for the best strategies that we could find that would reflect best practice in terms of carbon reductions. What we settled on was not a long-term goal of carbon reduction, but instead we focused on what are the things that we can do now? What can we do in the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months to really accelerate growth, to, as the mayor charged, to go faster? We focused on, we looked at a bunch of different frameworks and focused on C40's call that it came out with last fall for focused acceleration, which is really a strategy that says, do what makes sense, do it first, do it fast. Increase building energy efficiency as much as possible. Invest in renewable energy, including distributed renewable energy in communities. Focus on mobility, creating transportation options, and focus on electrification of vehicles. Many of the things that the first case study advanced. And what did we find from all that? And Shay is going to go through in detail some of the things we're doing in Brownsville that advance those ideas. What did we find out? We found out that reducing carbon emissions, particularly in the near term, particularly focusing on those strategies that make sense, is a really effective strategy. It's a really effective strategy that, yes, produces significant carbon reductions. In the instance we're talking about in Brownsville, a 20% reduction in building energy use across the entire community within a relatively short period of time over the next 3 to 4 years. So yeah, it reduces carbon, but the thing that it really does beyond that, though, that the modeling shows, is it makes the community more livable. It increases and improves air quality. It expands public services to residents in need, like moving senior citizens from their houses to efficiently and carbon-free, moving them to pick up prescription drugs and go to the grocery store. It creates jobs. Over 5,000 jobs would be created or sustained as a consequence of the investments that are being modeled and planned in Brownsville. What does that say, and what does it say for mayors? Well, I think what it says most importantly is good urban policy, good urban design, good urban infrastructure and investment is probably the best carbon policy that cities, states, and the nation can advance. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shay, who's going to talk in a bit of detail about the things they're doing in Brownsville, why they're doing them, and what comes next across ComEd and across all Exelon's utilities.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here to talk about what we are doing in Brownsville, a community south side of Chicago, and designing a human-centric neighborhood and leveraging the technology and investments and partnerships in the city of Chicago. As Bill mentioned, we have made significant investment in modernizing the electric grid and supporting our customers as they reduce the energy use. We are taking advantage of the energy ecosystem transformation and putting those investments to work in Brownsville as we work together to build the community of the future. For us, the community of the future is a place where ComEd and local community collaborate. I emphasize that on collaboration. Collaborate to create a connected, green, resilient, smart community. We are doing that by fully leveraging the investment in smart grid and a host of other technologies and related services to enhance the everyday lives of community members. The notion of neighborhood in Chicago is very unique, and the historic Brownsville neighborhood is an exciting place for us to start. It's the home of critical public infrastructure, including hospitals, Chicago Police Headquarters, and Fire Department. Brownsville is at the center of technology innovation and home to Illinois Tech. a partner with ComEd on new energy technology, and has already brought a number of innovations, technological innovations in the area, and a place to develop the workforce of the future. Most importantly, Brownsville is a vibrant and diverse community with engaged residents, business and leaders, and that they are ready to roll up their sleeves and work with us. As I mentioned, the community of the future is built on the foundation of investment, engagement, and innovation. It starts in part with making the electric grid smarter and more reliable. For example, a new digital network, about approximately 20,000 smart meters have been installed to serve homes, businesses, and key institutions throughout the community. Together with our partners, we have been able to attract additional resources to build on those investments and begin to test out innovations in the community. A central element of those innovations is the Brownsville Community Microgrid. On February 28, 2017, Illinois Commerce Commission, the regulatory body in Illinois, approved ComEd plan for Brownsville Microgrid. ComEd is leveraging 2 grants awarded by U.S. Department of Energy to construct the Brownsville Community Microgrid. The first grant, $1.2 million, is to support, develop, and build the advancement of the controller, a brain for that microgrid. It will connect with the microgrid on campus at Illinois Tech and creating the first nation microgrid cluster. The second grant by Department of Energy is a $4 million that has been matched by ComEd and a number of partners, including national labs, universities, and schools and technologists, is to build 1.25 megawatt of solar and energy storage within the footprint. The microgrid will be completed in 2019 and will serve about 1,100 customers within the footprint. The penetration of distributed energy resources and renewable like solar isn't just important because of its environmental and economical implication. It can also enable enhanced public safety and resiliency, which is the most visible in this project in microgrid. In the case of crisis, the microgrid footprint will serve as an oasis for public officials to deploy needed resources like medications and fresh food. Finally, microgrid may be able to provide black start capabilities to help restart the entire grid in case of wide-scale outages, cyber attacks, and any other security events. Energy efficiency is probably the most cost-effective strategy to reduce carbon emission and has been a major focus of ours within the neighborhood. As importantly, it contributes to neighborhood affordability and supports the local economy. ComEd is working with the City of Chicago on our partners to implement a comprehensive community efficiency strategy. The program is already underway and includes a number of campaigns for residential buildings and small businesses. This year, we hope to educate and engage over 3,000 residential and commercial customers, hold over 30 outreach events to expand participation, engage participants in our energy efficiency app Paid Forward, which is basically residents and small businesses can share their energy efficiency with their churches or any non-for-profit of their choice or neighbors in need. Complete comprehensive facility assessments for large customers and small businesses to help them to reduce their energy. By 2023, we believe that it's possible to reduce energy use by approximately 20%. As I mentioned earlier, engagement and partnership are key elements of our approach. And one of the things we learned from our engagement is that first mile, last mile mobility is a key challenge, particularly for senior citizens within the community. The community mobility pilot which is a collaboration with an entrepreneur and from Chicago to pilot and test efficient use of electric transportation service to address mobility. The service creates jobs for local residents and advertising for local businesses. The vehicle comes with 40 built-in sensors that allows us to collect data about cars' performance and use. The pilot examines the ability to integrate electric vehicle in smart grid foundation in a safe and cost-effective manner. We are actively looking to opportunities to continue expanding our partnership and the impact of actions and investments to benefit Brownsville, and to explore how to scale and replicate the model beyond Brownsville around different neighborhoods within the city of Chicago. Here are a few examples of how we are trying to use this approach to build on our work, enhance services, and link residents to resources. We formalized our collaboration with the City of Chicago as it develops its resilience strategy, focusing on how to expand low-carbon generation like efficiency investments to the city's Healthy Chicago 2.0, and connect our efforts around mobility and metrics to other initiatives like Elevated Chicago. We recognize that our partnership and technology investments create real opportunity for learning, innovation, and community impact. For example, of those opportunities would include Ideathon, which is an event working with number of schools from underserved communities, introducing them to STEM careers and engaging them in hands-on project over a course of 6 months. The other thing is a safe passage lighting at city schools. Finally, the work that is taking place in Brownsville is helping to shape the energy job and the workforce of the future, and we want to make sure that all residents can benefit from those opportunities. In September, we will be hosting the Brownsville Microgrid Showcase and Job Fair, where we will hope to introduce the community to opportunities with employers throughout the region around energy efficiency contractors, solar power developers, engineering and technology companies, and more than 50 companies participating in this effort with more than 200 jobs. Thank you again for having me here and allowing me to talking about our experience in Chicago.
Well, thank you both, Bill and Shay. Our final presentation for this part of the program is how to finance neighborhood sustainability projects. Our presenter is Susan Green with CDFI Relations for Bank of America.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. As a San Francisco native, just want to welcome you again to San Francisco, and I hope over the next few days that you'll get a chance to get outside and enjoy our absolutely beautiful September weather. So again, I'm Susan Green with Bank of America. As you'll hear later today and throughout this week, Bank of America takes environmental sustainability and responsibility seriously. It's not just a talking point, but truly embedded across all lines of business and all areas of the bank. For now, though, I'd like to spend a few minutes sharing with you some of what we've done with Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, and how CDFIs have innovated different approaches to financing sustainability measures at the local level. First, for those of you who may not be familiar with CDFIs, CDFIs are typically nonprofit organizations that provide loans and other assistance to borrowers and projects located in or serving low-income or underserved communities. As unregulated institutions, they have the flexibility to structure and underwrite their loans to meet borrower cash flow needs as opposed to following regulatory requirements. As nonprofits, they can receive grants and other supports to provide assistance and patience in working with their borrowers that may not be recouped from loan fees. Despite making loans that would be conventionally deemed as too risky, loan losses at CDFIs have been 1% a year over the last decade. This strong track record stems from a few factors. First, CDFIs are geographically focused. They know their neighborhoods and their borrowers and their projects well. Secondly, CDFIs tend to specialize in particular asset classes. They finance housing projects, small businesses, or community services. Finally, CDFIs have the ability to tailor their loan products to meet borrower needs. Over the last 25 years, Bank of America has grown our work with CDFIs so that we now manage a portfolio of $1.6 billion in exposure to 240 CDFIs operating in all 50 states. We have more capital to more CDFIs in more places than any other company. This is because we have seen repeatedly how CDFIs can spur economic mobility and create stronger, more resilient communities. CDFIs are a complement to our direct financing efforts, extending the reach of what we can do, particularly in low-income communities. I'd like to now give you a few concrete examples of how CDFIs have innovated to finance energy sustainability measures at the local level. First, Craft 3 is a CDFI that lends throughout Oregon and Washington. Some of their projects have included a biomass heating system, where they financed a system that took timber residuals from controlled burns and converted that into energy. They have financed wind turbine projects. And they also financed a project in downtown Seattle of the installation of a waste heat exchange system. This system took the excess energy produced by a data center and transferred it to a nearby office building to power that office's heat and water, which saved that office building 75% of what it otherwise would have had to spend on utilities. Beyond these projects, Craft 3 has innovated in how it has structured some of its loans. For example, Craft 3 created a loan program to finance energy efficiency measures on single-family residences by structuring a program with our local utilities so that the loan is repaid through on-bill utility payments. The utilities include the amounts needed to repay the loan on the utility bills that the consumers receive. And so the consumers, in paying their utility bill, are also repaying the loan to Craft 3. And then Craft 3 then the utility transfers the payments back to Craft 3. So this streamlined structure, in where the utilities collect the payments and transfer it back to Craft 3, has enabled Craft 3 to finance more than $50 million of energy efficiency upgrades on homes, even where the loan sizes average $20,000. Housing Trust of Silicon Valley is based nearby in San Jose. They provide early-stage financing to affordable housing developments. But they recognize that sustainability is not just about construction, but also about minimizing greenhouse gas emissions and creating walkable communities. As such, most of their recent projects will include units that are not just built to green standards, but are intentionally located near job centers and connected to transit corridors, so that the community is a sustainable one from many perspectives. An innovation we have seen from the Reinvestment Fund in Philadelphia is the financing of clean energy projects backed by power purchase agreements. These are long-term contracts in which a developer builds, say, a solar array, and then contracts to sell the energy to a user, like a school or a business. Most examples of this kind of financing to date have been with larger-scale projects. But by offering their borrowers small lines of credit that can be drawn down quickly to meet development needs, and in smaller dollar amounts to finance smaller solar installations, the Reinvestment Fund is bridging the gap and allowing all communities to thrive sustainably. Beyond the transaction level, CDFIs can influence policy to create more systemic change. For example, the Low-Income Investment Fund, based here in San Francisco, has partnered with others to spur significant policy change at the federal level that will make it even easier to finance retrofits of multifamily properties. As background, when tenants pay their own utilities, there's little incentive for the building owners to take on debt for energy measures. The key change here has been that HUD has now agreed to revise how they calculate and reimburse owners' utility allowances in a way that minimizes the split incentive and incentivizes the owners to improve their buildings and reduce energy consumption. This will not only spur the renovation of many properties across the country, but is also a model for how CDFIs can partner with public agencies to respond and create more sustainable communities. These are just a few examples of how CDFIs can finance neighborhood sustainability efforts, and Bank of America is excited to be a piece of the solution. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversations.
Thank you, Susan. More great work happening for communities. Much appreciate that.
although Mayor London Breed could not be here today, she does have staff here I would like to recognize. Elaine Forbes, the Executive Director of the Port of San Francisco, is here. Thank you for being here. Harlan Kelly, the General Manager, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Yay. And Mary Ellen Carroll, Director of San Francisco Department of Emergency Management. So thank you all for being here today to represent San Francisco. I would like to now turn some time over to the mayors and the businesses around this table to talk about, or ask questions that you might have to help promote partnerships throughout the nation, and how we can replicate some of what we've heard here today in other communities. And I'll take a question from anyone who might have one, or I can lead this off. Go ahead, Mayor Capalden. The microphone right there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question is really for Ms. Green from Bank of America, and I really appreciated the Bank of America's leadership in this field and the presentation. So I'm in West Sacramento, California, and in terms of community redesign, to not just achieve walkability, but walking and alternative modes beyond driving. And much of what we've seen across the country with the advent of much more at-scale bike share, electric scooters, love them or hate them. There's more personal mobility options as well. So the changes that are happening sometimes out of our expectations are very rapid. So in California, as you know, we have two other tools that many of us are trying to bring to bear together with this, and I'm wondering what your thoughts about how they might be integrated, particularly in the opportunity zone piece. And those two tools are, one, we've rewritten our TIF laws in California. Redevelopment, which is what we used to call, is all gone, and we have a new TIF tax increment financing tool, which is for a narrower range of projects, but those projects include any project that is part of a sustainable community strategy that is intended to achieve the greenhouse gas emission targets that each of us have been assigned by the state. So tax increment financing specifically for greenhouse gas reductions in communities, married with the second, which is that we have a pretty robust cap and trade system in California. And so cities like mine, and Mayor Schaaf as well, but cities, we're the #1 recipient of cap and trade dollars in my own region for use in particularly low-income communities, in supporting parks, art, affordable housing, ripping up neighborhoods to make the streets, to make them more walkable, undergrounding utilities, to create the conditions where walkability and dramatic reductions in car usage can occur in the neighborhoods where that investment is the most needed. And so with the advent of opportunity zones as well, I'm curious if from a lender's perspective, from the bank's perspective, how you're seeing the potential for the integration of these very on-the-ground financing mechanisms to make radical transformations in ways that can drive significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions at the city level.
I think it's something that we're very excited to see some of these developments and interested to see how we could play a part in partnering. Opportunity zones, geographically based areas where investors now who have capital gains will get shielded from some of the taxes that they would pay on the capital gains if they invest that capital into opportunity zones. Between that and some of the public subsidy programs that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of opportunity to leverage public-private partnerships so that the public dollars can provide the subsidy and the patient capital to fill in the gaps where the private sector capital can then leverage to create even higher impact. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and directly and with our CDFI partners, we're excited to be a partner.
Very good. Other questions by anyone? Go ahead, Mayor.
Let me pick up on the mayor's last question and really focus in on the question of financing. One of the problems we've got in regards to development is that while we can come to agreement, and I'll use one simple example, we can come to agreement with the developer on the design and the configuration of the development, the developer cannot get financing. For example, there's a loan committee somewhere that is insisting on a certain ratio of parking per square foot. And I just want to expand on this topic and point out that those responsible for financing, whether we're talking walkability or financing regarding parking or any of the kinds of energy efficient or recycling, for example, adding a plumbing system that includes gray water. Our efforts are thwarted because we're still dealing with 20th century financing committees, and that has to change.
Thank you. I totally agree. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Green is very popular because we all have these financing issues. So just to follow up on that thought, we in Santa Monica a number of years ago, we had a parcel downtown that was very small and practically impossible to configure any underground parking in. So we said to the developer, you know what? You can spit on the light rail from that location. We have all sorts of bus service there. It's very walkable. We'll approve that building without any parking requirement whatsoever. And yet, the developer could not get anybody to finance the project. And we took that a step further last year when we approved our downtown plan. In the interest of promoting affordable housing downtown near transit, because we know the highest transit ridership is with low-income households, we put requirements on any new market rate housing to provide anywhere from 20 to 30% of the units is deed-restricted affordable to everywhere from extremely low-income to moderate-income households, a particular mix of that. And the development community screened and hollered and objected. We said, wait a minute, but what we're also going to do is we're going to eliminate any minimum parking requirements. And once again, they're finding that it's difficult for them to go to the capital markets and get anybody to understand that in the future, we're not going to need as much parking. And building parking contributes to carbon emissions. It's, we're going to build parking that 20 years from now, people aren't going to be using. It's a waste of capital. Do you think the capital markets will start coming around to understand that you can build housing without parking?
We have seen both at Bank of America and with our CDFI partners, much more interest in financing sustainability measures. Bank of America has just issued our 4th green bond, so raising capital specifically to finance sustainability measures. And as I've mentioned, we've seen where CDFIs have the ability to kind of use more flexible and more creative underwriting and loan structuring requirements so that they can bridge the gaps where the capital markets won't go directly. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that we're seeing from institutional investors and then also with CDFIs to bridge those gaps.
Can I add a perspective?
Yes.
AECOM did a project with the City of Boston called the Smart Utilities Vision that was done with the Boston Planning and Development Authority. And out of that work came 5 new requirements for any major redevelopment. And this was on the heels of, if any of you saw pictures of ice flows going down through the seaport area in Boston, because the planning was around putting up big buildings, but not necessarily around the people that live there, the conditions that we have in the harbor, et cetera. So out of that became 5 different things that developers now have to look at that are smart infrastructure, that are more resilient, more energy efficient, and low carbon. The reason that was done was to give the backstop to developers who went back to the banks then and could say, I'm just following the requirements now of the city. So it gave them the landing strip for them to come in and say, we have to do it this way, so the banks have to think differently. What we got back from the developers was that if we can make those kinds of things happen and have a fixed way of policy, it enables them to save 1/3 of their planning expenditure and potentially 1/3 of the time to redevelop the neighborhoods. So using the Dorchester neighborhood as the way to do it right and creating this really has flown high cover now for the developers with the banks. And I think that cities are in a position to create those kinds of opportunities so that it's a lot easier conversation down the road.
Great, thank you. I know in my state, there's the potential of backlash and banks running to Capitol Hill to run legislation to override local decisions that are made. So some of us don't have that kind of support, but that's great and a tool that could be used by many in this room. Did you have another comment?
In some sense, as a follow-up, I wanted to ask Ms. Crane and comment and AECOM about the opportunity zone question. So among mayors, we've had a lot of conversations with land developers and kind of big development project folks. But for the utility sector in particular, are you looking at the opportunity zone opportunity and what sorts of partnerships or opportunities with cities and mayors, if you have looked at them, do you see possibly emerging?
Yes, absolutely. Do you want to respond to that?
I'll try to tackle that one. As Jackie indicated, we have a fairly robust development community in our legislature. So what we've done as a utility is really gone to the developers that have an interest in doing the right thing. And, we're working with a couple developers. One of them right now he's quite innovative and creative. We're working on a 600 apartments complex that is going to be fully sustainable. It's going to include a battery in every apartment. He is appealing to the citizens of the future who want to know that they have the sustainability and the reliance. And so we've partnered with him. He brought us in. He could have sidestepped us, but he brought us in because he wanted to partner with us, and we were fortunate. And what we're finding as a utility is that if we get over our old mindset, right, that creates obstacles for us, what we're finding is that there's value that innovation can, if done correctly and interconnected to the grid, in a certain way, that we can actually get value for the rest of our customers through the innovation that he's leading there. So that's one example. We've also worked with a company who wanted to do a fully electric, sustainable, low-income housing complex. And everyone told them it wouldn't be affordable. They couldn't do it. And they have proved them wrong. They've tapped into the incentive offerings that obviously we provide in the community through our energy efficiency, but they've gone beyond that and they've been able to figure it out. So we're now bringing that together and actually sitting down with groups of developers, with these folks as advocates to talk about how you can do it. Because we need to leap ahead of whatever the planning and zoning, might be there that's restrictive to where we really need to go. And we really need the community and the leaders in the community to take us forward. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to help facilitate that.
Great. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for ComEd and AECOM. The City of Oakland has done a similar project to what you're discussing, a retrofit of a single-family neighborhood to all-electric, zero-net energy, shared electric vehicles, all in a very diverse community with lower incomes than average on this. A key component of the work we did was to create a guide for local governments on how we can update our own processes. We found significant challenges with the zoning code, with approval processes for sewers and water lines and building inspections where we had unpermitted second units, and the number of these things is significant and a huge barrier to these happening throughout our cities. So my question to you is, from the work that you've done, it sounds very substantial. How do you plan to help other cities then overcome the barriers that you identified in Chicago, and how do you think that scales? Is this just a Chicago solution, an Illinois solution, a Midwest solution, national? How far do you think what you've generated can scale?
It's a very good question, that replicability and scaling these initiatives in a larger scale, not within City of Chicago, but within the region. We are trying to ComEd is an electric utility, so our focus is around our service territory in northern Illinois. We've been trying to utilize different stakeholder, similar to this Metropolitan Mayor Caucus, as sharing best practices, as well as engaging them in different conversations and understanding the priorities from their perspective. A very good example of it with Metropolitan Mayor Caucus, which there are like 600 municipalities and villages, mayors participating in those conversations, how we can utilize energy efficiency lighting and providing additional services, or how can we put measures for permitting and streamlining that type of effort for smaller communities or government in municipalities. There has been 2 legislation passed in Illinois, and the most recent one is 2016 that provides significant energy efficiency funding as well as for solar. And what we are trying to do is starting small scale and then making our strategy integrating within City of Chicago. So it goes back to the previous question as well, that the state incentive gets directed with the same understanding, going through utility and partners to the places within the city of Chicago, and partnering in a larger scale with Metropolitan Mayor Caucus in different regions within the state.
Okay. And just to build on Shay's thing, I think one of the things that's really unique about what they've done with the Mayor's Caucus, which again it's a group of mayors across northern Illinois, is they've formalized the collaboration through a memorandum of understanding. Then they have very specific engagements with communities around defined projects. So they started with smart streetlights and energy efficiency reduction. And then there's a provision in the memorandum of agreement that says, we're going to work together on this. The city recognizes that the utility is in fact a regulated entity, and if they come up with something really cool together, that city's going to go with them to the Commerce Commission along with that association of municipalities and advocate for change. So it's trying to standardize things that we're working on together, focus it towards a real solution, and then embed it in regulatory decision making. I think that's a good model that actually is built on a lot of the intergovernmental cooperation models that cities have worked on and are comfortable with across the United States. The work that ComEd is doing in Chicago is being replicated in the other Exelon utilities across the country. So the CEO of ComEd has just become the CEO of Exelon Utilities. So there's a concerted effort within that investor-owned utility to make a difference in all its communities. And I think that's another lesson for cities that are served by investor-owned utilities that cover multiple cities. Call up the mayor in the other utility service territories and start talking about what you can do together. It has a real potential to accelerate success. I think one of the other things that is interesting about ComEd's collaboration with the city of Chicago, a number of the things on things like solar and other investments around low carbon are specifically looking at not just what the utility should be doing, but like you said, what should the city do differently about permitting? How can it use its purchasing power to invest in things that the utility is precluded from investing in? And one of the things that we've seen around the country, which is reflected in this discussion, is that partnership with cities, utilities, organizations like CDFIs really kind of helps to redefine and broaden the definition of public-private partnership. Too often we narrowly define public-private partnership as an entirely for-profit, market-driven entity and the government, and we miss a huge number of partners in between that have maybe different return expectations, different missions that include more social elements. And if we broaden that partnership, we likely get better solutions, like the example of working with the CDFI and the utility to collect the money because that's the most stable way and gives you the best rate of return. That's where innovation and collaboration takes place, and I think where we see some of the best innovations around the country.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not a question, just want to share with you our experience on our initiative in sustainability and clean energy. Foster City is in San Mateo County, which consists of 20 cities, which is right adjacent to San Francisco. 2 years ago, we took an initiative in collaboration with the County of San Mateo and all 20 cities and established GPA, Peninsula Clean Energy. What Peninsula Clean Energy allowed us to do, leverage our purchasing power as 20 cities and the entire county by procuring clean energy, and we rolled the program into the cities to where the consumers will get 50% of their power of electricity from clean energy, with the option to choose to get 100% clean energy into their homes. The interesting thing was that with the 50% program, it is cheaper than what the utility companies provide today. The 100% clean energy, a little bit more expensive. And as cities, Foster City is one of them, took the initiative and converted all city utilities into 100% clean energy. So those kind of partnerships between cities and counties and private companies will go a long way in leveraging to where we have a meaningful impact on clean energy and our sustainability.
Okay. We have just a few more minutes. If there are any last thoughts that anyone would like to share before we continue on with the program. Go ahead.
I'll just share quickly that in Washington, D.C., where we are aggressively trying to figure out how to retrofit many of our buildings. In D.C., we don't tear our buildings down very often. And so part of our challenge is retrofitting along with the new development. And so putting the financing together, I do believe that there is a level of conservativeness, in financing. So we're standing up a green bank, and hopefully the green bank, as we figure this out, will be gap financing. But as we all know, the innovation is going to move faster than the comfort level of traditional financing. And so as we just tried to look at taking the waste heat off our sewer system for a new development around our soccer stadium, I'm not sure what the barriers would be in terms of technology, because they're not there. But the barriers of course, is getting our developers and the community to think about how they will participate in a way in one neighborhood around district energy. So as we try to figure these out, I'm not sure that's, the solution is a green bank, but that is what we're doing. And then I know that with our new soccer stadium, we did a PACE note for $25 million to get solar wrapped around the building and some other retrofits. And so the PACE financing has worked somewhat for us as well for some of the new developments. But certainly our next challenge is how we finance and at the same time use a bit of a stick to get our buildings retrofitted to meet our clean energy goals.
Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this conversation. Our next topic is the path towards renewable energy, where we have Des Moines Mayor Frank County to discuss Mid-American's 100% renewable by 2020 plan, followed by our Energy Chair, New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell, to discuss offshore wind, as well as some interesting information that our staff put together regarding the role of renewables in our energy mix. Mayor County?
Thank you, Mayor Biskupski. It's interesting as I sit here with her and know that I've worked with a couple of her predecessors who I thought were really liberal environmentalists, and to see the work that she's done in the short period of time, congratulations, and look forward to working with you. She's given me sort of the privilege of before I jump into our work with Mid-American Energy, to quickly make a couple of statements as I look at our Madison mayor, and I think of Mayor Piscupsi, and think that, you know, we're sitting in the middle of a continent. And some people think, you know, what in the heck's going on? Why are you guys even here? You know, sea level rise is not going to bother you guys, and there's probably not much going on out there. And I will tell you that it has sort of been a very interesting year. And I will tell you that when I took office interestingly enough, in 2004, I was looked at as sort of this, you know, tree-hugging environmentalist, and why would we ever have one of those people be elected as mayor of our great city in the middle of the heartland? And why should we even care about that stuff? And I could go through everything that we have done, all the policies and plans that we put in place in our strategic plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and establish citizens task force, and had forced through a sustainability plan, a walkability study to some of the points that were made about how we move people around. And it is important. And it's important for all of us as local leaders, because quite frankly, sometimes at higher levels of government, not a whole lot's happening in certain areas of the world. And I will tell you that as a consequence of some of the things that have happened prior to any of us being born in this room, or possibly, you know, even thinking about what's going to happen moving forward, let me just tell you what happened in Des Moines, Iowa this summer, June 30th. We had just a little storm that came by Des Moines, and we thought it was going to be a interesting rain event. And it started about 9 o'clock, and by 12:30, Des Moines, Iowa had seen, depending on which area of the city you lived in, between 5 and 10 inches of rain in 3.5 hours. Now, I've got to tell you, that's like a monsoon. And as we think about how we respond to that, the immediate response, not only how do we plan for the future and what do we do, how and where do we build? Are there certain areas that we shouldn't build, even in the middle of the heartland, and that are subject to flooding, and we ought to think differently about it? Of course, some of our citizens who were caught in some of those areas think we ought to have an enlarged sewer system. And I've got to tell you, as I look at the size of this room, that kind of rain running down into a sewer, we would have needed one almost the size of this room to be able to handle that amount of water in that short amount of time. And, you know, then the question we're all having is, you know, is that what we're looking forward to? And what is it that we can do? So this whole conversation around this room, and I will tell you that I am a advocate of what I call legitimate larceny. So I've been taking notes here, and I'm going to steal everybody's best ideas and hopefully try to take them home to Des Moines, Iowa, and see if we can't implement some of them, and we hope that you'll do the same. But I will tell you, as I sit here as mayor, all the planning that we do, it can't all be solved at City Hall. It's solved often with our partners. And one of our best partners in our efforts to think about the future and think about how we attain our goals of greenhouse gas reductions, and what is it that we can do. You know, we're going to make our buildings more efficient and use less and less energy as best we can and in as many ways we can. But I got to tell you that since 2004, one of our best partners silently has been working with us, and I talk to them quite frequently, and especially early on, as they only had about 2% of their generation was renewable. The rest of it was through sources that emitted some sort of pollution. And to tell you today, and I'm going to quickly go through some of the information that we got from our friends at Mid-American Energy. I will tell you that they have a 100% renewable energy vision and plan, and Mid-American Energy has so far invested nearly $7.7 billion in Iowa wind projects since 2004. And quite frankly, with the construction of Wind 11 and Wind 12, that will rise to more than $12.3 billion invested in wind energy. And in 2016, they announced Wind 11 and rolled out its 100% renewable energy vision. And in 2018, the utility proposed Wind 12, which is a project that once constructed would allow the company to deliver an equivalent of 100% of its customers' annual usage through renewable sources. That's unbelievable. And as we track that progress towards that 100% energy commitment, Mid-American proposed a Green Advantage program to give the benefits from the renewable generation Mid-American Energy provides to its customers to meet their corporate sustainability goals and also the individual goals of an awful lot of their customers. And I will tell you, as we think about reducing and all the ways we can do it in our city buildings, and we have a vision that we're going to reduce energy use by 28 to 30% by 2025. We are excited to tell you that I think with our partnership with Mid-American, we probably have already beaten that goal in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions with their renewable portfolio. But I will also tell you that in Iowa, you can't just say you're doing that. You have to submit it to the Iowa Utilities Board, and they have to look at all your numbers and your figures, and they decide whether or not those numbers can be verified. And I will tell you that in 2017, they submitted their efforts to the Iowa Utility Board, and they verified that at the end of 2017, and it just happened in June, the verification that they are now at 50.8% renewable in their system in Iowa. And I will tell you also that I can go into all the details of it, but I've got a few booklets for those of you who would like to read through it, but tell you that it is my understanding that they have committed and believe, and it will have to be verified, of course, but that they will be 100% equivalent renewable by 2020. That's unbelievable. So as we work with our partners and we try to figure out how to do our best, know that they often, it's got to happen in the residential sector, it's got to happen in the transportation sector, it's got to happen in our corporate, commercial, and industrial users. We all have to work together to achieve our goals to try to limit our greenhouse gas emissions so that the temperatures do not rise more than 2 degrees, and we hope that 1.5 is attainable. And as I look at Josh Swasilek, who we worked with through the White House Task Force, and Josh got his hand up over here. I think that he's here today as opposed to being in Washington, D.C., because he knows this is where the action is taking place, that local governments are the ones that are moving forward, making commitments, and actually working with all of our partners locally and regionally to attain all of our goals. So I thank everybody for being here, and I look forward to all of our exchanges. Mayor, turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor County. I appreciate that very much. Mayor Mitchell?
Thank you, Mayor. Morning, everybody. So let me begin by echoing Mayor County's platitudes about your leadership, Mayor Biskupski. This is really a great event, a really great report that not only we should take a really close look at, but evangelize to all the communities that aren't here today. It's a very useful point of comparison about where each one of our cities are in our efforts to get to 100% renewable. I want to thank also President Benjamin for his leadership over the last couple of years in urging more cities to make the pledge to get to 100% renewable, to stand up and say, and raise their hands and say, I'm going to pursue the Paris goals with vigor. And I want to just also thank our Executive Director, Tom Cochran, who really got this conference in the business of renewable energy and energy efficiency well before anybody really understood that mayors could play a key role in promoting it at the national level. And so here we are today. We are way out in front of it. As the chair of the Energy Committee, there are a few things I wanted to cover today, and I wanted maybe just to set the table a little bit and offer up the highlights of some of the data that the conference staff has collected. Rich Anderson and Judy Shaheen did a great job pulling together some benchmarks for us as we talk about pursuing our renewable energy and energy efficiency goals. So just a couple of points to mark where we are. So right now, as mayors across America have taken the 100% renewable pledge, there are right now, today, renewables consist of represent about 17% of all energy generation. Nuclear is still at about 20%. And fossil fuels about 63% of all generation. Now, the growth in power production capacity has started to shift in the direction of renewables. So from 2011 to 2018, based on reports published by FERC, geothermal, solar, and wind capacity grew by a combined 83 gigawatts, which is pretty significant. Natural gas capacity, not surprisingly, grew at the same time, but by only 53 gigawatts, which is surprising given the growth of shale production. Coal and oil sank along the way by a total of almost 91 gigawatts. So we're clearly seeing a trend in the direction of renewables that is real. So things are heading in the right direction. The question, of course, is whether it's fast enough, and that's why we're talking here today. So when we talk about net energy generation overall, right? So how much energy is actually produced measured in gigawatt hours. The total electricity net generation has held fairly steady since 2006, which means that despite the growth in the economy and the growth of the U.S. population, we're still using about the same amount of electricity. And net energy generation from fossil fuels has declined 8% over that same period, from 2006 to 2016. And other clean and energy strategies have helped renewables move to the front of the table. So, as we talk about here, as we have, so how do we do it faster? How do we do more? There are a couple of things that I'd like to highlight. First of all, almost exactly a year ago to the day, a year ago this week, we, the Energy Committee, held a conference in New Bedford to discuss next steps, and it's particularly in the context of the conference's efforts to promote its agenda before Congress on the infrastructure bill, or bills such as they were. But what came out of that, I think, is a lasting set of ideas that will our hope is that with a new Congress that we'll be able to get up to bat again to promote not only all the traditional infrastructure interests that we have as cities, but in the area of energy. And so what emerged, and this is in your materials, is something that Tom dubbed the New Bedford Principles, and I just thought it was such a brilliant idea to name those set of principles after my city that we've been evangelizing that wherever we go. But basically it gets at the need for promoting a number of things that have been near and dear to mayors' hearts: the reestablishment of the Energy Block Grant Program, promoting partnerships with utilities, as we've been discussing today, as well as the promotion of microgrids, which is something that inevitably this country will be talking about again next week. Unfortunately, the topic seems to come up with every natural disaster, and unfortunately for folks in the Carolinas, we hope that they won't be talking about blackouts and the need to protect critical facilities and get them back online. But given the forecast, I suspect we will be, and yet we've had no action at the federal level to close what are some fairly quantifiable market gaps in the establishment of microgrids for places like hospitals and nursing homes and water treatment plants and so forth. So that's certainly a place where the conference is going to be in the years ahead. And that has been a point of frustration. I'm here today to talk primarily about a point of good news, and that is the developments in an industry that has fully matured in Europe that is just coming to the United States now, and that's the offshore wind industry. There are right now, the offshore wind industry has been around in Northern Europe since 1990. The first offshore windmill was built off the coast of Denmark in 1990, and over the course of the last 28 years, the industry has, through fits and starts, has fully built out to account now for a major portion of Northern Europe's energy generation. There are right now 84 utility-scale wind farms in the North Sea, and they're all over the place. If you fly into any major Northern European city and look out the window on a clear day, you will see them all over the place. And right now, there are no utility-scale offshore wind farms in the United States. There is a 5-turbine project that was built last year off of Block Island, Rhode Island, that is represents America's first foray into the offshore wind industry, but there are no power plants in effect. There are no utility-scale projects in the United States, and that's all about to change. The consensus among industry analysts and among policymakers in this space is that the United States is on the cusp of a very rapid expansion in this industry that will probably exceed what's happened in the United Kingdom, which is now the leader in offshore wind. To give you a little bit of sense of the UK experience, the first offshore windmill in the UK was planted in the seabed in the year 2000. In the next 2 years, the UK, which is already the world leader in offshore wind, will hit about 10% of all of its electricity generation coming from offshore wind. Here in the United States, there are, on the East Coast, millions of square miles of space that has already been leased by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management for the purpose of allowing for the development of the offshore wind industry. And now there are 3 states on the East Coast that have made major commitments to incentivizing the development of the industry, and specifically it's Massachusetts, it's New York, and it's New Jersey, all 3 large states that have large ratepayer bases that can absorb what are now fairly dwindling subsidy levels needed to get the industry off the ground. So I know, Mayor, we had a rule today against, for those of you who are not familiar with the offshore industry, I know we had a rule today against PowerPoints, and this is the one thing I would really love to show everybody, and this won't work unless you really squint, but these things, For those of you who don't know, these things are gigantic, so squint really hard and look at just how big this is. So offshore windmills are of a scale that is considerably larger than what we see on land. So, Mayor, what you guys have in Iowa, just think about twice the size in terms of height off the ground and many multiples larger in terms of the capacity of the turbines. It is what we've seen in the last several years in Northern Europe to make the numbers work in the industry is a huge scale up. The Europeans have been subsidizing this industry for many years through a variety of mechanisms that vary by country. And they're at a point now because these things, because the turbines and the blades, which are now in the most recent models about a football field long each blade, are now producing electricity that is competitive with fossil fuel sources. So that's great news for this discussion, and it's all about to unroll in the United States, first on the East Coast, and then I suspect later in places like Northern California, Hawaii, and other places that have deeper water and will need new technology with floating turbines to make that happen, all of which is actually developing pretty quickly right now. But on the East Coast, just the most recent marker of progress came in Massachusetts in some 2 months ago, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts awarded the first contract for utility-scale generation of an offshore wind farm. So that went to a company called Vineyard Wind, which is a joint venture of 2 European companies that are in the business in Northern Europe. And they are going to build a $2.2 billion project off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. New Bedford, I'm here not just because I'm the energy chair, but also because New Bedford is the closest industrial port to where many of these wind farms will go, and so we are positioning ourselves to become the launching pad for this industry, but there will be many American ports that will be in this business, and it portends to be a big part of the solution to our region. When I say our region, the entire Northeast, for starters, effort to get to 100% renewable. We're looking at an industry that is embryonic right now and will continue to grow over many decades as it has in Northern Europe. And so when we talk about how do we make it go faster, well, and I'll leave on this point, Mayor. There are a few things that we need to do to throw some rocket fuel on this expansion. One is at the congressional level to promote the extension of the investment tax credit, which offsets a lot of the capital costs. The capital costs, as you might imagine, in building big offshore wind towers out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or any ocean is quite expensive. Those tax credits are set to expire in next year, so I think that's a big part of it. States that have, Congress also should be investing in more in research, particularly in the area of floating turbines, so that the West Coast and Hawaii and the Gulf can become a bigger player in the industry. And there need to be more states that and utilities that embrace the idea that this is a way of getting to 100% renewable a lot faster, in large part because it's a proven concept in Europe, and the technology has gotten so much better in the last few years, and the components have gotten so much bigger in the last few years that it is getting closer to competing on par with fossil fuels. So if we're in a hurry to get to 100%, offshore wind has to be part of it.